blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. There's a table that you prepared for me in the presence of my enemies. It's your body and your blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battle. Oh, and I believe you've overcome, and I will live my soul of praise for all you've done. This is how I fight my battles. 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 This is how. In the valley, I know that you're with me, and surely your goodness and your mercy follow me. So my weapons are praise and thanksgiving. This is how I fight my battles. Oh, and I believe you've overcome, and I will lift my song of praise for all you've done. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. My victory's in Jesus' name. 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 This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how.
morning, Table Tribe. My name is Ashley. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Here at the table, our mission is to guide people in a forward-moving relationship with Jesus, and you can partner with us by sharing this video with a friend, a family member, a coworker, or someone you think needs a message of hope today. We wouldn't be able to do what we do every week online without your continued support, and if you're wondering how you can give to the table, you can mail in, text to give, or give online. We hope you enjoyed this message, and here's week 3 of Jumping Ship with Jonah.
Hello again, Table Tribe. Welcome back to another week online here. We are so glad that you have joined us at the table. My name is Jeannie and I'm one of the pastors. I am so excited to be bringing you the 3rd week of our series, Jumping Ship with Jonah. I'm going to give you a brief recap, but the cool thing about services online is that you can always go back and find the ones that you've missed and watch them. So I encourage you to do that. At some point, we've all discovered now that life is not all butterflies and rainbows. We've all not done things that we know we are supposed to do. We've ignored that call from a certain person. We've kept scrolling when we've seen that desperate plea on social media. Or we've all seen that meal train invitation and have pretended that we didn't. At some point, most of us have all jumped ship, mostly because we believe that the outcome is not going to be in our favor. What if that just makes us all modern-day Jonahs? What if to be a part of God's bigger picture, we need to do something that we don't want to do and get back on board? A few weeks ago, we were introduced to Jonah, who was a prophet from Israel, who God told to go to Nineveh with a message. However, Jonah pulled a 180 and he went in the opposite direction, which caused him to go in a downward spiral, which eventually ended up having him being thrown over the side of a ship in a storm and then swallowed by a giant fish. We learned in that first week that it is when we own our own bad choices that God can use us in his bigger picture. Last week, we sat with Jonah in the belly of that fish for 3 days, and we finally discovered what God wants us to learn in those situations, which is when we cling to our own way, we are depriving ourselves of God's love for us. We also learned that there is absolutely no way that we can save ourselves. Jesus is the only one who can save us.
Here at the table, we like to talk during the talk. Here's a question you can discuss with your family. When did you do something you weren't sure how it was going to turn out, but you had nothing to lose?
Have you ever had a birthday that was particularly difficult? Maybe one of those milestone birthdays? For me, now don't laugh because this isn't usually a milestone birthday, but for me, it was turning 30. You see, I was living far away from my family and I was still single. To make matters worse, not only was I still single, but I didn't even have any prospects. There was nothing on the horizon for me at all. And my younger sister was already married. I was sure that I was not called to be single. But what was I supposed to do? Where was I going to meet somebody? There were no available guys at church. And I didn't go and hang out in bars and clubs because I'm just not cool like that. So one day, a few months after I turned 30, I was sitting down just having a conversation with one of my girlfriends, and we were both single, and we were just talking about and commiserating with each other about the, troubles of being single and how you can't meet anybody. And all of a sudden she said to me, "Hey, why don't you join eHarmony? Even if you don't meet anybody, at least you'll learn something interesting about yourself from the personality profile that you have to fill out." So I thought about it for a while. I went back home, I thought about it. And finally I thought to myself, you know what? What do I have to lose? Nothing else is currently working. It's not like my current plan of sitting around and waiting for somebody to fall from the sky is working. It's a pretty safe option, and I've got nothing else to lose, so why don't I just try it? So I went and I got my roommate's computer, and I signed up for eHarmony. Now, fast forward to today, and I've been married for 13 years and have 3 sweet kids, all because I did something that I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I really had nothing to lose. And that girlfriend that encouraged me to sign up, she was the maid of honor at my wedding. When we were last with Jonah, we were with him sitting in the belly of a fish, and he sat there for 3 days. And at some point, he finally figured out what he needed to do, and he confessed his sin to God, and he asked for forgiveness. So what happened next? Well, the story tells us the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Apparently, it wasn't enough that Jonah had been sitting in the belly of a stinky fish for 3 days. What really needed to happen was that he needed to be covered in fish vomit. So then the story goes on. The word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. "Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you." This part strikes me as really funny because it's like God, says, "Hey, I know that you kind of had a rough go of it the last couple days, so I'm just going to give you a little reminder, and I want you to go to Nineveh and preach the original thing that I told you to do." And then I'm just picturing Jonah. I just picture him with me. He's like basically laying prone on the beach after just being, thrown up from a fish. And he's already, he's been in a fish for 3 days. He's covered in fish puke. And then God tells him he has to go on his original mission. And Jonah's thinking to himself, "Really, God? Seriously? I still have to go?" But we need to give Jonah a little credit this time because the story says Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh.
Our second question today is to talk about a time you were given a second chance, and did you take it?
I don't know which beach the fish puked Jonah out on, but if it was anywhere in Israel, it means it was about a month's trip to get to Nineveh. On top of that, once Jonah got to Nineveh, it was going to be a 3-day trip to get across the city. So just picture and imagine what Jonah might have looked and smelled like after he'd been vomited out of a fish, and then he'd taken a month's trip to get to where he was going. I imagine it was pretty nasty. And on top of that, I don't think he was probably in a very good mood. You see, Jonah's expectation was that this was going to be a completely wasted trip. The people of Nineveh were absolute heathens, and they had no reason to listen to Jonah or to listen to his message. In fact, on top of that, they really deserved whatever punishment God was going to give them. For crying out loud, they were heathens. So Jonah really didn't have high expectations, and when he got there, he was ready to preach a hellfire and brimstone message. And so this is what happened. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming, 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. See, Jonah expected to deliver his message and then hightail it out of town before God destroyed the entire city. He didn't want to be caught up in any of that. And he was just expecting that this was going to be a total waste of his obedience to God. He had no idea why God called him to go in the first place. But then the people of Nineveh did something that Jonah completely did not expect. The Ninevites believed God. A fast was proclaimed, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. This is the proclamation he issued in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let people or animals, herds or flocks taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink. But let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish.
Our final question today is to talk about a time you were in a situation and the outcome was completely different than what you expected.
I imagine at this point that Jonah was completely shocked. Not only did the Ninevites listen to his message, they obeyed God and they turned around and pulled a 180. They went in the opposite direction. And see, there's something really important to notice here about what the Ninevites did. They obeyed God without knowing what the outcome would be of their obedience. They obeyed God without knowing whether it would make a difference in God's bigger picture at all. Remember what the king said? Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. In other words, what have we got to lose? You know, so many times we put conditions on our obedience. We say, okay, God, I'll obey you, but here's what I need you to do for me if I obey. And then we give him a list of our requirements. The people of Nineveh got it right. They obeyed without knowing what the outcome would be. So how do I know that the people of Nineveh got it right? I know because of what happened next. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. We may not always know the outcome of God's call, but I know this: God always honors obedience. God never wanted to destroy the people of Nineveh. He sent Jonah to them so that they would have a chance to turn from their evil ways and to get on board with him and be a part of his bigger picture. Here's what I want you to know today. While we may not know the outcome, God is always in it for our good. God is always in it for our good. God created humanity in his image, and he wants to give everyone the chance to turn and to have their image restored and to be made whole again. Are you resisting something that God has called you to do because you're not sure what the outcome will be? Here is my challenge to you today. Obey God and trust that He wants the best for you, even if you aren't sure how things are going to turn out. So, where do we go from here? Well, there is a little bit more in the story of Jonah and the people of Nineveh. So I hope you'll join us again next week for our final installment of Jumping Ship with Jonah, when we get to find out what God's bigger picture really is. Bye!
Thank you so much for tuning in today for week 3 of Jumping Ship with Jonah, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye!